Hey everybody, how's it going? Meister here, and today's video is going to be a little different than my usual content. My usual content is literally me just playing Cities Skylines in a Let's Play format. But having sunken in over 250 hours into Cities Skylines 2 since its release about 3 or 4 months ago, I feel that now's a good time for me to leave my honest review about the game. You know, I've mostly played through an entire game of Cities Skylines 2, and what I mean by that is I've reached the end game stage of a city. And that means that I've reached a population of over 100,000, I've leveled up almost all the way to level 20, meaning that I've unlocked most of the progression points, most of the signature buildings. So by this stage, one would have a pretty good idea of how the game works and how a city progresses from a small town to a megalopolis, right? So, you know, I didn't want to leave a review day one because I really wasn't that familiar with the game, but at this stage, I feel like I can give you guys a fair and honest review about the game. So while I'm blabbering on for 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to be building away at the western suburbs in Bixton. So honestly, the reason why I'm doing this review as well is because I didn't really have much to talk about in the next episode of Bixton. So with a lot of other content creators posting their reviews about the game, I figured I would do the same while I'm just building away here in Bixton. So let's jump right into it. Overall, I can say that I'm having a pretty good experience with Cities Skylines 2 so far, despite all of the game's graphical issues, performance issues, glitches, bugs, whatever. I'm still having a good time. But that's about as far as I would go. The game leaves a lot to be desired in its release format. I'm used to playing city builder games in a much more city painter type fashion, where I'm used to spending a lot more time and focus detailing my cities, making them look nice, rather than spending a lot of time making my cities function better or trying to maximize my income, for example. I don't really care about those things too much. And that stems all the way back to my SimCity 4 days, where, you know, mind you, I was pretty young back then, so I had no idea how cities worked. I had no idea how economies worked, nothing like that. So I really struggled with that aspect of the game, but I can tell you, my cities look damn good. And that kind of continued throughout my whole city building career, even in Cities Skylines 1. But Cities Skylines 1 was a pretty simple city builder game, if I'm honest. For example, in that game, if you had crime in a particular area in a city, you could simply plop down a police station and the crime would magically go away. In Cities Skylines 2, it's not so simple. There's a lot more depth to the game, a lot more complications, and a lot more layers that you have to worry about, which I really like. I like that there's an element of challenge in the game. I like that there's just so many more things that you have to worry about and check. But the thing that really bugs me so far about Cities Skylines 2 is there's so many features and things that should have been included in the base game that are simply not there. So for me, who likes detailing, there's barely anything to work with in Cities Skylines 2. There's no props, there's no textures or decals that can be added to the ground, and CO knows that this is a huge part of their fan base is people who like to build these realistic and nicely detailed cities. There's just no such options in Cities Skylines 2. One feature that really bugs me, for example, is placing down trees. You have this radius around each tree or each type of fauna where there's no overlap. So you can't create like these really dense forests, or let's say you want to place some nice decorative trees in between a building and a road where you have like a little strip of grass. It can be very difficult to fit trees in a very tight space. Now, as far as detailing, really the only thing that we have at our disposal are trees and paths. Now, I must say I really enjoy the way paths work in Cities Skylines 2 much more than in Cities Skylines 1. First of all, the paths are really nice because you can take snapping off completely and you can create these really tight and intricate path system throughout your city. I really like that the paths are much less wide. They're very narrow, much more a realistic size if you're just creating a regular path throughout a park. I really like that. But what really bugs me is in Cities Skylines 1, we had two types of path. We had pavement paths, and we have dirt paths. And there's no such thing in Cities Skylines 2. We only have pavement paths. So if I want to create a custom nature park in the middle of my city, I don't have the option of creating hiking trails or anything like that. I just have access to pavement paths, which takes away a little bit of realism. Now, that's not a huge deal because that's nothing that mods can't fix. I mean, I'm sure 100% there's going to be a dirt path mod, but why not include it in the game? Because it was in Cities Skylines 1, right? At the very minimum, I would hope that Cities Skylines 2 has what Cities Skylines 1 had at launch. Now, I know there's probably going to be some sort of nature park DLC coming down the pipe, but I don't know. I think CO has maybe gone a little too far in setting themselves up for future DLC release. I think that there's just a little bit... The game lacks substance as far as detailing goes. Now, one thing that bothers me as well are the parks in Cities Skylines 2 are not that great. They're not that well designed, I think, and the fact that you can't even snap paths to the parks really, really bothers me. And it's kind of a shame, too, that all of the parks in Cities Skylines 2 only have 1 or 2 path entrances, and they're all on the same side of the park. So in Cities Skylines 1, there were so many great parks, so many parks that you could just integrate in the middle of your city, and you can connect paths to them, and, you know, you can just make them part of, you know, maybe like a big nature park that you're building. I felt like the parks just blended in so well in Cities Skylines 1. Texture-wise and prop-wise, I don't know. I think that the parks were just way, way, way better in Cities Skylines 1. One thing that really bothers me, for example, is the parks in Cities Skylines 2 have like this grass texture that if maybe you're plopping a park down in a non-grid city where you have like these weird squiggly roads all over, well, the grass is not really going to snap to the sides of the road. So you're going to have like this really nice manicured grass with these weird gaps where like the grass texture is different and it's just like a sharp change in texture. You know, that to me is really, really bugs me. I know that there's mods out to fix that, but I mean, I don't know. Just parks looked just so much more cleaner in Cities Skylines 1. They just blended into the environment much, much better. In my opinion, I don't think there should be a manicured grass texture at all in the game. I think grass should be the same whether or not you're in a developed area or in the middle of the woods. I think it would just make everything so much easier. I think the grass texture, like for example, what you're seeing on your screen right now is totally fine. It would avoid like these weird sudden texture changes from like parks to not parks. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining myself clear, guys, but you know, hopefully you understand what I mean. Now, another really, really big park-related issue is that parks are just never used in the game at all. If I plop down a giant city park or whatever, there's never going to be anybody using the trails, or if I plop down a soccer field, there's never anybody on the field playing soccer. It's just going to remain barren for its entire existence. Whereas in Cities Skylines 1, if you plop down a soccer field, there was immediately kids that would spawn on the field and start playing, and you had people in the bleachers, and your parks were just functional. But there's no such thing in Cities Skylines 2 for some reason. So, you know, hopefully there is a fix for the parks not being used issue. But at the same time, that's kind of concerning that it made its way into the production version of the game, because it's a quite obvious issue, right? You don't have to look very far to realize that nobody's ever using any of the parks in the game. So hopefully this is going to get resolved at some point and parks become alive. But, you know, for the time being, that's one of the biggest things that really disappointed me. It kind of felt like the game was just rushed, and all of those little quirks and issues just weren't ironed out. And I know I'm kind of like, I mean, that's a pretty obvious statement. Of course the game was just rushed, but yeah, I mean, nonetheless, these little issues are quite disappointing. Another little thing that I've noticed that is quite disappointing for me is, for example, in Cities Skylines 1, when there's a fire that breaks out in a building, fire trucks are going to be dispatched to that location. And once they reach that location, little firemen are going to come out of the fire truck holding hoses that extend out from the truck, and they're going to start hosing down the building with water. And you can see all that happening on the ground. No such thing happens in the Cities Skylines 2. The fire truck just pulls up next to the fire and the fire magically disappears. Same thing with pallbearers that go to collect dead people. In Cities Skylines 2, it was pretty funny when I saw that the first time when 2 pallbearers come out of the hearse holding a casket to go collect a dead person. No such thing happens in Cities Skylines 2. The dead people just simply disappear when a hearse pulls up. So for most people, this might be a very subtle feature that, totally goes unnoticed. But for me, this is what makes or breaks a game. It's all these little tiny Easter egg details that add so much depth and so much immersion. And the fact that they don't exist in Cities Skylines 2, it just takes away a little tiny bit of that immersion, right? It just makes your city feel a little less full, a little more empty. And don't even get me started on the tornadoes in Cities Skylines 2. Like, what is this? They look so much better in the first game. And the fact that they don't even leave a trail of destruction behind them just perplexes me. They just simply run over a few buildings, disable them for 10 seconds or so, and it's like nothing happened. Now, I guess those are the main issues that concern me as far as detailing goes and as far as like more of the visual aspect about the game. I've also been seeing a lot of complaints from people saying that there's not enough assets in Cities Skylines 2 and that they look all the same and there's not enough variance and blah, blah, blah. To be honest, I don't think this is much of an issue because it seems to me there's at least as many assets at launch in Cities Skylines 2 than there were in the first game. Now, I get it. They kind of look all similar. They're all in this New York theme. So if you're building any other type of city, it can be a little bit of a struggle. But it's kind of to be expected, right? The game is fresh. They're not going to add like a million different types of buildings. And of course, it's Paradox Interactive, right? We're going to have to wait until there's DLC that's released, these content creator packs and building packs and whatever. It's just the way they work. Now, I personally think the buildings look fine, most of them. However, I can agree that the single-family homes in both European and American themes are not that great. They all look the same, and they look nothing like American-style homes. So, whatever. This is not a huge deal for me. I'm sure it's going to be improved as additional content gets released. And I think we can all agree that the buildings in general look much better in Cities Skylines 2 than they did in Cities Skylines 1. We don't have these weird, huge ice cream cone billboards spinning around on top of purple and pink buildings, right? The buildings look clearly much more realistic in Cities Skylines 2, so I'm not complaining about that. And to be honest, even with the limited collection of buildings that we have access to, it's still pretty easy to get amazing looking cities from up above. Now, as far as visual issues, that's pretty much all I got. CO has actually done a pretty decent job, I would say, at fixing a lot of visual issues. We no longer have those weird snow glitches on the edges of maps, or at least I'm not experiencing them on this map. I haven't tested all the other maps, so I don't know, maybe it's still a thing, but it doesn't appear to be, at least on the Tampere map. Now let's talk about simulation. To be honest, there's not a whole lot that I can say about the issues with the game simulation. I feel like there's creators out there that can do a far better job than I can explaining what these issues are, how they need to be fixed, and that kind of stuff. I don't really focus too much on this aspect of the game, although I can say that I've experienced firsthand some issues with the economy. I still don't know how I'm making this much money. So I remember a few episodes ago, I wasn't necessarily struggling, but I definitely had to like watch my income. I had to save money to plop some of the buildings that I was unlocking. And then I loaded the game the next morning and I was making $100 million a month. So I have no idea if there was some rebalancing that was done to the game or what the case is. But if that's the case, I'm not sure I really like it because it removes an element of challenge to the game. Now, I'm thinking this might be a bug because every now and again I'll load into my game and I'm making negative like $200 million a month, and then I'll go check what's happening, and it's always one type of material that is just causing my economy to crash. And I have to subsidize that type of material in order to get back into the positives. And it's weird because I'll load into the game the next day and it'll be the opposite. I'm just losing so much money, and then I have to raise taxes back to like whatever they were before. Usually it's around 9%, I think, by default. And then my tax situation is okay. I'm making money again. So there's clearly something wrong with the economy simulation in the game. I just don't know what, but like I said, I'm sure there's some other creators out there that can explain in far more detail what these issues are. Like I said, I'm more focused on the looks of a city than how all this like deep simulation stuff happens. You know, if there's crime in my city, I just plot police stations and I raise and lower taxes sometimes. That's about as far as I go. You guys just help me out a ton with that kind of stuff, guys. So I really appreciate you guys. So yeah, as far as the simulation goes, that's really all I have to say. Although I will say, I gotta thank you guys as well for pointing out that the postal sorting facility just doesn't work. So I guess I gotta include that too. So thanks for that, for letting me know. I would have never figured that out. But it's kind of a shame, really, that that was allowed to make its way into the production version of the game. I don't know, it's kind of strange that that was totally an oversight, or anyway, I don't know what it is, but it made its way into the game, and it's kind of unfortunate. And what is also unfortunate and has caused me a little bit of grief so far in Bixton is I find the road AI struggles so much in certain situations where there really shouldn't be any problems, such as a simple merge. I find that drivers are struggling to merge, and it's causing these huge bottlenecks where there really shouldn't be any bottlenecking at all. So the AI really needs to be reworked. Now, as far as game performance goes, my computer runs the game okay, I would say. I normally hover at around, well, between 30 and 50 FPS, depending on what part of the map I'm working on or how zoomed in or out I am. You know, if you're working in an urban area, it can greatly affect your FPS versus if you're working in a rural area where there's just nothing, right? So that's give or take what I'm getting as far as FPS goes. And I know like CO has kind of explained what to expect as far as performance. So, you know, as long as I'm getting 30 FPS for this game, I'm okay with it. I know it can be a struggle for people who might be running on older hardware, but yeah, I mean, I also see CO's point of view on things. They're going to be supporting this game for potentially 8 to 10 years, right? How far is hardware going to progress in the next 10 years? So they didn't really hold back on performance requirements. They want this game to be, you know, next gen for whatever hardware is going to be coming out in years' time, right? But on the flip side, I get it. The game obviously could have been optimized a lot more than what it is right now. In my case, you know, having a pretty decent computer, I'm okay with the performance that I'm getting. You don't need 60 FPS per se to play Cities Skylines, although it would be nice. Now, other performance issues that I have been having though are, well, not really performance related, but I've discovered that anti-aliasing just doesn't work in this game at all. Now, I'm running TAA, that's a mode, or I guess like a certain type of anti-aliasing that does seem to work, but it causes these weird artifact issues to happen when I'm in the camera mode, and, you know, these weird texture glitches to appear. That doesn't really happen in any other type of anti-aliasing system, but they just don't work. So whether they're on or off, there's no difference whatsoever. I've tested them all. I've ran through all of the anti-aliasing settings, and the only one that works for me is TAA, and I just put up with the texture issues when I'm recording cinematics, which, you know, it's not very often, but when I do, I've done a few tutorials before using these camera tools, and it was frustrating at times when you have shadows that are glitching in and out, and you have road textures that are flickering and things like that. Yeah, that can be a little frustrating. Now, despite everything I said this video, it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said in the very beginning, I'm still having a ton of fun playing Cities Skylines 2, and I'm not going to stop anytime soon. In fact, there's a ton of features in Cities Skylines 2 that I think are huge upgrades over the original game, such as the road tools. All the snapping options that we have now, and the parallel road tools, it's really great. And I'm loving the fact that highways are now lane-based instead of node-based. allowing us to create these really intricate and complex interchanges with very little effort at all. I'm loving the new zone types, and I'm loving that we can upgrade buildings as well. All in all, I think what I'm enjoying the most is the map sizes. I think the map sizes are fantastic in Cities Skylines 2. They allow for massive cities or multiple cities on one map. But unfortunately, I think the biggest problem is that we were sold a very basic, stripped down version of what Cities Skylines 2 should have been. There are so many features and details that either don't work or just don't exist at all. But despite all of this, I remain pretty confident in CO and Paradox Interactive to bring the franchise to its former glory. And while I think a lot of the negativity around the game is warranted, everybody's entitled to their opinion and everybody's allowed to be angry at Paradox and CO for putting out an incomplete game. I feel the same way. But I also feel like a lot of the negativity being thrown around is a little bit blown out of proportion. I'm seeing so many people leaving comments on all platforms, just kind of regurgitating what they've already heard, or just kind of like hopping on the hate bandwagon just because. And there's a lot of these comments that are not constructive, they're not providing any feedback. It just seems like a total echo chamber of negativity that doesn't really help anyone. And as a community, I think we have a vested interest with CO and Paradox to at least help them create the game that Cities Skylines 2 should be. And I think they're well aware of what needs to be done in order to create the game that we wish Cities Skylines 2 was. And I think they're doing a fair job at communicating what they're doing to fix all of the issues in the game with the Word of the Week post, and they seem to be keeping us quite updated with what their future plans are for the game and how they're going to bring it up to par. And maybe I'm just being a little too naive here, but I'm giving CO and Paradox the benefit of the doubt, and I remain hopeful that they're going to fix a lot of the issues that we're being faced with. Because I always believed that the Cities Skylines community was one of the least toxic out there. Everybody's just so respectful and helpful. We're a long way from Call of Duty, right? So, I don't know. I think as a community, we should just give Paradox a little bit of time to figure their shit out. And hopefully they will, and hopefully they have learned a valuable lesson to never screw over the consumer, especially not the gaming community, because they'll be the quickest to point out any BS that they're throwing around. The same thing has happened to EA multiple times. It's happened to pretty much any AAA studio that I can think of. These executives take power and they just try to make a quick buck, and that often comes at the cost of good content, right? So, hopefully the game gets better. I remain optimistic that it will. A lot of the issues will hopefully get ironed out here in maybe the next coming months, or maybe it'll take a year or so, but overall, I'm hoping that the game will be headed in the right direction. So that is all I have to say, guys. That is what I think about Cities Skylines 2. Let me know down in the comment what you think. Are you upset? Are you pretty content with the game? Let me know down below. Also, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified of future content. So I'm going to continue with releasing my bi-weekly content as much as I can, so just expect a lot more of Bixton, and you can expect some more Cities Skylines 1 Rockport pretty soon. I want to get back into Cities Skylines 1, as the viewership seems to be just about the same for both games right now, which is kind of shitty, but it is what it is. So guys, thanks for watching, and until the next episode, take care.